Yes, thank you again for joining us today. And so my name is J Hwu, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Government Affairs for Wiley. And I'm going to be setting the stage for our panel discussion by sharing the results of Wiley's recently launched Digital Skills Gap Index, or DSGI, which evolved from the work we started in 2017 with APAC. And APAC is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Multilateral Group, and it consists of 21 economies in the Pacific Rim and promotes free trade throughout the Asia Pacific region. Back in 2017, the initiative was called Project DARE, which stands for Data Analytics Raising Employment. APAC Project DARE set out to identify the core digital competencies needed to address the digital skills gap. And after identifying the needed digital skills, fast forward to 2021, when we set out to measure the global digital skills gap. Next slide, please, Horace. So these are some of the top line findings of the DSGI. And you may be asking, why is it the Digital Skills Gap Index and not the Digital Skills Index? Well, what we're trying to measure here is the gap between the supply and demand of workers with the digital skills employers want. And to close the digital skills gap, we need to better understand where the gaps are, as well as the size of the gaps. Next slide, please. There are two parts to the index. And as mentioned, because DSGI evolved from work we started with APEC, we're using APEC terminologies, so economies instead of countries, and Chinese Taipei instead of Taiwan, etc. So we conducted a survey of subject matter experts from the 21 APEC economies, and we also use secondary sources for all 134 economies included in the ranking to compile the results of the index. And you can find the full methodology on the DSGI website. There were 6 pillars used for the ranking, and I'll be very briefly going through them. Next slide, please. So Singapore was ranked as the economy with the smallest digital skills gap within APEC and also globally. In other words, there is still a gap between supply and demand, but it is not as pronounced in Singapore as it is in other economies. Singapore scored consistently well across most of the 6 DSGI pillars, confirming its reputation as a high-achieving meritocracy. The city-state's digital focus is another key area of strength. Its lifelong learning entitlement is second to none globally. The affluent economies of the Middle East, United Arab Emirates and Qatar, they also invest heavily in human capital and so ranked among the top performers in the DSGI. The economies in Scandinavia, including Finland, Sweden, and Norway, also performed well. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to briefly walk you through the 6 pillars of the index and highlight the top 10 economies in each pillar. Sorry, there's something about the first pillar we measure is the digital skills institutions, which looks at digital skills upon graduation, availability of corporate digital training, enablement of teachers in data science and analytics, as well as the number of years of schooling, maths literacy, tertiary graduates in IT subjects, and staff training. In this pillar, Chinese Taipei came up tops. Next slide, please. Tertiary education institutions could do more in narrowing the digital skills gap. Only 7.3% of our survey respondents rated their economy's university graduates as highly skilled in terms of their digital readiness for entry-level employment. On a positive note, most respondents believe graduates are digitally skilled, but despite that, 30% of the respondents said that graduates are unprepared for the workforce. So in other words, while the graduates are digitally skilled, those skills are not fit for purpose for employers' needs. Next slide, please. The 4 digital responsiveness factors we looked at for Pillar 2 are the responsiveness of skills development systems, the responsiveness of the education system to the digital skills requirements of employers, digital skills in the population, and global science and technology skills. Next slide, please. Our respondents across the APEC economies told us that education systems are only somewhat responsive to the digital skills requirements of employment. The digital skills requirements of employers. Next slide, please. In Pillar 3, government support compares the level and quality of government leadership and support, including funding available in each economy. So this pillar looked at government understanding of the digital skills landscape, government commitment to closing the digital skills gap, coordination among government, employers, and academia, the importance of ICT to government vision, and government success in ICT promotion. Now, there's some surprising results here, but bear in mind, we're looking at government commitment in this pillar and not the level of digital skills in the economies. So Rwanda, for instance, while Rwanda is near the bottom of the rankings for sub-Saharan African countries, its government is actually actively pursuing comprehensive digital skills development for all their citizens. And it is undergoing an incredible digital transformation, empowering and educating its youths and achieving a high degree of gender equality for sustained growth in the ICT sector. The respondents were split on the level of coordination between government, employers, and academia, but more respondents rated the coordination as weak and very weak than strong and very strong, with employers the least impressed by the level of coordination. Next slide, please, number 11. So Pillar 4 looks at the mismatch between the supply and demand for digital skills and how the STEM gender gap may be a contributing factor and what this means for the competitiveness of economies. Slide 12, please. And as shared earlier, only 4.2% of our survey respondents were completely satisfied with the level and availability of digital skills. And all categories of respondents see the digital skills mismatch between employers' needs and job seekers' talents as a serious problem. For corporates, of course, it's a far more urgent concern. Next slide, 13. The STEM gender gap persists, and almost half of the survey respondents cited the gender gap in the economy as either very significant or significant. Slide 14, next slide, please. So for Pillar 5, data ethics and integrity, respondents were asked, how confident are you that today's workers are equipped to handle data ethically? Next slide, please. About half of them said they do not believe employees are equipped to do so, and very few respondents said they're confident in this regard. Next slide, please, 16. So we wanted to harness Wiley data to inform the DSGI, and Pillar 6, research intensity, looks at the academic research output relating to digital skills. This pillar profiles a number of published articles that include phrases such as artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain, cloud computing, coding, etc., and also the output of articles relative to the size of the postgraduate student population. So we looked at academic articles per 1,000 graduates, academic articles growth, and academic articles published by Wiley for this pillar. And not surprisingly, the US and China dominate the global research output on this subject. Next slide, please. Despite the fact that this survey was about digital skills, respondents selected problem solving as the most important skill set needed in the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So that's an overview of the top line results of the DSGI white paper. The other component of the DSGI I'd like to briefly share is the interactive website that allows users to see how each of the 134 economies rate in the 6 pillars and the various sub-pillars. Next slide, please. So you can download the results of each of the 134 economies individually, or you can compare 2 economies according to the same measures. Again, you can find the full methodology on how we arrived at the results on the website. And next slide, please. So every country recognizes that they have a digital skills gap, and we welcome discussions on how we can work together to bridge that gap. We're starting work now on DSGI 2, and I'd like to invite your input, feedback, and partnership. There's a short video on the DSGI website which shows you how to navigate all the tools and dashboards, and I encourage you to have a look. And unfortunately, I cannot stay for the discussion, but please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about the DSGI, and my email address is on the slide.
And everyone, I think as we follow up from this session, apart from the sharing session earlier by CJ, in the website or the interactive website for Wiley Digital Skills Gap Index, there is an accompanying white paper over 80 pages with a summary of the headline takeaways based on the survey results. So you can read more about it after this webinar. So for the poll, it suggests, at least from the participation from this webinar, that there are some to large extent issues arising from the digital skills gap, either in your organization or from your own experience. In this afternoon's discussion, we will look into what is driving the skills gap, from the panelists. And I will now invite everyone or the panelists first to tell us a little about yourself beyond the brief description we have shared, and then explain what is driving the digital skills gap. Prof. Leong, shall we start with you?
Okay, thanks very much, Chor Meng. A very good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I thank Wiley for having me. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Susanna Leong. I work in the university. I'm a professor of law, but my full-time job now is looking after the university's continuous education, training, and lifelong learning. In terms of all the initiatives and programs that the university has. What is driving the digital skills gap? I think we need to pay attention to perhaps three things. The first thing is the shortening, I would say the shortening of half-life of knowledge in particular domains, especially in the digital arena, and the impact that the technology advancement has on the workplace and on enterprises. And so we see the disappearing of job roles as a result of all these technology advancement. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is the lengthening of the fact that we have to remain in the professional capacity for a longer time because we are living longer and we need to work longer. So the job roles are changing. We have to stay in the workforce for a longer time. The question then is, are we prepared for the changes in the job roles? So then that brings us to the third part, which is where I'm coming from. Are we preparing our students for this change? And that goes back to the education model that we have. The traditional model is that we have our students go through and finish certain milestones. And typically we say that they are good, all right, when they finish the undergraduate. And if we continue to have this kind of traditional education model where there is a terminal point in terms of learning, then I think this will continue, will contribute to the gap, because we can't stop learning, and the model, the education model itself must change to one that is continuous in learning. That's what I have to share for now.
Thank you, Prof. Leong. We'll keep moving, I think, to the other speakers who may be ready.
I can go next, since you didn't call up anybody. Hello, for all of you out there. I'm Kiran Mani. I'm part of Google, and I essentially run partnerships for Google for the APAC region. Huge kudos to the team that came up with the DGSI study. An effort of this nature is always not only fraught with danger, but there are so many parameters to consider before you actually come up with how do you really rate nations on digital skills gaps. I want to pause for a second and just acknowledge that today was a live example of not actually digital skills gap, but a very important aspect of digital, to say the opportunity of digital and the challenges of digital were so visible in the 20 minutes that CJ was presenting. The opportunity of digital is that 600 people can actually get on and discuss, debate, and decide on a topic which is so important that will shape the future of humanity. And the challenges of that are we are still doing that with such rudimentary systems, and we are making it happen with duct tapes. I think I'm an eternal optimist, and I look at this and say, this is exactly the place where the future holds promise, right? I think Professor Leong did an amazing job on explaining the why of digital skills gap. I, for example, grew up with digital skills where using a calculator and knowing how to use the various buttons on it was as good of a digital skill that I used to have. What I might offer you is 3 other points on what kind of digital skills should we as nations or should we as organizations start thinking about. So one of the things that I offer up to you is I think one of the quick evolutions of digital has been from a vertical, which is like automotive or like FMCG or like finance. At one point of time, digital was considered a vertical, digital industry, we used to talk about it. And I think its quick emergence as something that is all pervasive, just like medicine is, it's much more a horizontal. It almost has become the health metric for organizations, irrespective of which field you are in. And when you start thinking about digital as a horizontal, I think you can think about skills from three perspectives. Number one, it's very much an evolving science, just like health is, right? We are still very much at the beginning ages of what we can, the possibilities that digital can bring in. And I think for anything which is as an evolving science, continual education, continual R&D is crucial. So if in health, it is about constant education for doctors, the equivalent of digital is coding. Because unless and until you have that basic coding skills, you cannot reimagine a future. So that's going to be a very core skill building in order to evolve future frontiers of digital. Number two, again, I could draw the analogy to health, that having great doctors in itself is not important. Having great infrastructure is equally important. Having great governance is equally important. Digital today probably suffers from an evolving governance and infrastructure ecosystem. You can already begin to see that in data ethics conversations. I think some of the infrastructure problems got solved in the last 5 years, thanks to large companies laying data pipes and telecom evolving. But if that infrastructure begins to fray, large bodies of information cannot be shared or grown. And finally, anything that affects humanity to this extent requires leadership. And what I mean by leadership is more emotional content, right? We are already beginning to see that, whether it is small aspects like children are over addicted to screens, or whether it is large aspects of managing large companies during a pandemic and managing the emotional quotient of people. There is a whole amount of leadership that is required in order to avoid digital causing massive cultural and social divides versus actually equating populations and growing them collectively. And I think one of the things, if you look at the GSI's report, the 6 pillars of it absolutely address these 3 aspects, which is why I found it very encouraging. Thank you. I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
Good afternoon. I am Ethel Agnes Valenzuela. I am from the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Secretariat here in Bangkok, and I'm happy to join you all in this conversation. And allow me first to congratulate John Wiley and Sons, or popularly known as Wiley, for a very comprehensive profiling of the Digital Skills Gap Index 2021. It's very useful. We can determine the mismatch between employers' needs and skills, as well as the barriers and challenges to digital skills development. So SEAMEO is actually, the organization is actually an executive arm of the Ministries of Education in 11 member states in Southeast Asia. And your question is on what is the trigger for this digitalization? I think since a decade ago, we have known that Industrial Revolution 4.0 or Industry 4.0 has transformed many global labor markets and economies across the world. And over the last decade, because this is really forcing us to really have a new kind of curriculum, right? So we want to see that educational system will be able to catch up with all of these changes in Industry 4.0 and deliver the expected competencies from its graduates. So as we see from the Wiley study as presented by CJ, Singapore ranked #1 is BSG 2021 and first among the 134 economies included in the index. And in some pillars, I can also see some Southeast Asian countries, Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand, and they have been having a good rank in many of the pillars. And that's very good to see that, many of our countries in Southeast Asia are a bit, very competitive in terms of digital readiness. But I see a strong educational program change that should happen to support further the development of digital skills. So based on our work with Wang Libing on the digital kids in Asia and the Pacific, we have completed last year as well. Indonesia has the highest internet rate. Philippines spend more time online, an average of 9 hours and 45 minutes a day. And even in Laos, 79% of population have access to mobile phones. 43% of Laos students have access to internet. And many of the Southeast Asians are active users of social media. But we're talking about digital skills that the employers need. So in terms of ICT tools and internet, we are getting there. However, in terms of digital creativity, digital innovation, we still have much to learn from the advanced countries among the 134 economies that you have mentioned. But during the pandemic, of course, ministries of education have to change educational delivery overnight from face-to-face to remote, online, on-air, on-demand, hybrid teaching. And they were able to adjust overnight to deliver classes remotely. ICT tools, digital technology companies helping, teacher training. These were among those interventions that were done by the ministries of education. And given the scarcity and availability of resources depending on which country, they were able to use LMS, radio and television broadcasts to reach the unreached population. So no one size fits every country in Southeast Asia, but I think this study will help us look further on the curriculum from basic to higher education. And thank you very much for sharing this one. Thank you.
So maybe I'll jump in at this moment. Hi, everybody. My name is Vincent Quah from Microsoft. I head up the education side of the business for Microsoft for the Asia Pacific region. Firstly, also thank you, Wiley, for the work that they have done on this DSGI. I still remember a number of years ago when I was sitting down on a number of multiple occasions having the DARE discussion with CJ in various forums. It was something that we know it's going to be very, very important. And I think today we're seeing the fruit and the final output and outcome of all those years of effort that Wiley has put in. And so thank you so much for taking that leadership. I also want to add a +1 to Susanna and to Kiran on all the points that they have raised, because they are all very, very relevant. What I want to provide is 3 points or so. I think we all like numbers of 3. 3 things to think about. The first is that the DSGI is a set of indicators. And as a set of indicators, they are just that, indicators, right? And whenever it comes to skills, whether that's digital skills, personal skills, soft skills, hard skills, any kind of skills, we always have to remember that every time when we come out with an indicator like that, it is a lagging indicator. It is not something that will be able to establish a trajectory, but it is something that will tell you this is what we know today. And things are going to change much, much faster. I'm always trying to think of what then are the kind of leading indicators that we can capture that will help us even prepare ourselves more, because this is so critical. And it leads me to my second point. And that is, we need to, and I'm trying to be quite contrarian here. Maybe people might not like the idea, but we are very much have spent a lot of time on the notion and the concept of lifelong learning. I don't see anything wrong with the lifelong learning, but my advocacy or my way of thinking is that we want to help people think of not just the lifelong learning part, but to be able to translate what they have acquired from their lifelong learning endeavors into something and apply it so that they can actually achieve lifelong livelihood. They're all still else. One is learning, but the other one is actually translating it into livelihood, would then actually translate into impact and outcome. Now, these two have very, very large, there's a very large gulf in between, because we also know that just because a student graduate with specific skills find it very hard to get employed in the industry, right? And so that's something that we will also have to think about and to find ways in which we can match it. The third point and the final point is, with the rapid changes that all of us have gone through over the past 2 years, and I still remember the days when World Economic Forum came out with the fourth industrial revolution, and every country, everybody was so excited about the fourth industry revolution. We talk about the future, the optimism, the potential, and then the pandemic hit, and we're like reverting into trying to figure out how we actually manage this pandemic and going through. I think the last point I want to make is we all have to be models of what that living laboratory for learning looks like, and trying to encapsulate it and then trying to propagate it and empower people to help them achieve those goals and those aims, right? Not just the learning part, but also the livelihood part. So I'm just going to pause there, and hopefully it will provoke some thinking and some thoughts, different mindset, different mental models for us to consider. Back to you, Chor Meng.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. This is Libing Wang from UNESCO Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education, based here also in Bangkok, Thailand. First of all, I would like to congratulate the launch of this very important Digital Skills Gap Index. We are happy to see the very comprehensive presentation from CJ. As you know, that it covers very comprehensively, covers all the things. Actually, it already answers the questions of the driving forces for digital skills gap. I think for UNESCO, it's very clear that we need to think of the lack of coordination between demand and supply side, because our education and training system is mostly supply driven rather than demand driven, right? And it's not easy to really change this from supply driven to demand driven, or to get both sides aligned with each other. Very, very difficult. But also, as you know, that we are trying to integrate ICT digital skills into school curriculum, and also a national qualification framework as a academic infrastructure to inform the development of learning programs, whether it is provided by traditional universities or other non-traditional providers. I think this is extremely important. But of course, other gaps are also driving the digital skills gap, which include infrastructure, access to internet, of course, capacity at institutional level, and also at teaching personnel level is also very, very important. And we also need to think of developing a very good ecosystem, which UNESCO has been doing since 2014, even before the pandemic, try to help member states to think of developing supportive ecosystem for digital skills for kids and also for adolescents. So I think this is really very relevant to our mandate. And once again, congratulations to the launch of this very important index. I'm sure it will be very useful for us to really reflect on all the gaps that are leading to digital skills gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Li Ping. After establishing the extent of the skills gap and discussing the accompanying causes in the last 15 minutes or so, which include digitization, infrastructure readiness, longer lifespan, industry demand changes, and then lack of coordination between supply and demand of skills. I think the bigger question, and I'm seeing some questions coming through from the chat as well, is what are we doing to help close this gap and widening gap? Li Ping, we can continue to maybe stay with you. I think you discussed some areas, I think, which governments are doing. So staying at the national level and from your experiences in UNESCO, how serious are governments in tackling the skills gap? And if you can share a little of what they do, how effective I think those efforts are, that would help.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's very important that the government should play pivotal roles in promoting this digital transformation. I think you can see in this region, some systems are very decentralized with a very limited role from the government, but in some systems, it's very centralized. So whether it's decentralized or centralized, we would like to see the government taking the leading role, not only developing the national visions for digital learning, but also provide a very good ecosystem. From UNESCO, we are pushing for the recognition of learning, and the qualifications obtained from non-traditional modes. And we are pushing for flexible learning pathway to qualifications. And yes, of course, governments have a lot of things to do to lead this transformation process. I think we have seen a lot of good examples from countries in this region that they have some blueprint, national visions, for online learning, digital transformation, which is really very important, followed by budget for it, rather than only pay lip service, right? And then to see if all the digital skills can be integrated into school curriculum and train teachers accordingly, and to then integrated into national qualification framework to inform the development of learning programs, right? Whether it is short-term or full qualification, or nowadays we are very much favoring this so-called micro-credential, right? To downsize this learning program to make it more flexible and relevant to the needs of the students and the communities. So I think government has a lot of roles to play, whether it's decentralized system or centralized system, so that we can have a very good ecosystem at system level, at institutional level, and also even at faculty level, to make sure that proper tools can be developed to support teaching personnel to develop their teacher learning program and plan their course accordingly. So UNESCO has been done a lot. In my section, we promote this holistic approach, and down to the development of learning programs, and also to the course planning templates, which is very, very down to operational level. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Libing. Still staying at the national level, maybe Dr. Ethel, are you able to share similarly, I think, from your own experience, to what extent is the skills gap a problem to governments in Southeast Asia? And at the ministerial level, what are governments doing about it?
Thank you very much, CM. So I think I would like to support the presentation of Dr. Libing, because in our region, 11 countries, with the driving forces of all changes, trade liberalization, then we have advancement in ICT. We also conduct all of these employability of graduates, tracer studies for universities, and that we see the gaps, even before this the SGI study. So ministries of education, higher education have revised the curriculum, revitalized or some overhauled the curriculum to integrate 21st century skills. Now, in all countries in Southeast Asia, most of their curriculum have 21st century skills, developing competencies in problem solving, critical thinking, communication skills, data analytics, including coding, as mentioned by Google speaker. So all of these were already embedded in the curriculum. But the strengthening of STEM education is also one thing. So what are the countries doing in Southeast Asia? For example, many of them have also revised the structure. They have now National Center for Information. They have the IT Council, like in Brunei Darussalam. They also have developed their Vision 2035, focusing on promoting quality education, digitalization, online and distance learning, to share that one. And then if we see, for example, even in Lao PDR, they have digital learning platform developed. Cambodia also has open educational resources. Malaysia has been supporting e-learning policies, Indonesia also, and of course, Singapore. And in countries, it's not only restructuring and developing ministries for ICT, they also have to adapt to ICT tools and doing partnership with big companies to enhance their platforms. So stronger cooperation and partnership between and among agencies of the government, educators, parents, students, they are really very important at this time. And for example, the national e-learning policy, countries such as Malaysia have that. Myanmar also established and strengthened their distance education universities. And then we can say for the Philippines that interactivity, digitalization, and delivery of 21st century skills, OERs, these are all now part of the curriculum. But what is interesting, for example, is a national online learning platform now being available in all countries. They're really doing their best, getting the best teachers and letting them also share their talents. So we have to focus on the curriculum review and then constantly involve industries, business in designing or redesigning the curriculum. At the national and the regional level, they have adopted 21st century skills as our priority areas at SEAMEO. And every year we report all the accomplishments in terms of programs, project, budget, funding, and cooperation. So it's a long list of 11 countries. Sorry for that. And thank you very much, CM.
Thank you, Dr. Ethel. If we switch from the national level down to the demand side, I think Vincent shared earlier that a large part of the skills gap or demand comes from industry, where jobs are created and where talents are supplied to. So Vincent, if we look at the skills gap from a talent and demand standpoint, can you share what Google is doing to upskill your workforce and the community? And then we may then move on to Kiran. I think to just stay on from the demand side, I think having two big global companies, I think here with us, I think we're keen to learn more about what you're doing in relation to the skills gap.
So I'll let Kiran talk about Google and I'll talk about Microsoft. So what we know for a fact is that there's going to be well over more than 800 million jobs that will be needed by 2030 that will, be in the tech space. And we're seeing that already every day, right? Because tech is so embedded, so integral into every aspect of not just a personal life, but also a student's life, an educator's life, a parent's life, a shopkeeper's life, a small, medium business life, an enterprise life, and so on and so forth, right? So tech is just going to be more and more embraced. I think the second thing is that possibly also to the number of about 150 million new tech jobs that's yet to be designed. And so, we are playing a very massive catch-up game here. We know that those are the big numbers that we have to try to figure out how to work together with government, with the industry, with the education sector, and trying to understand how to cater and mitigate those gaps. We ourselves will also have to understand what is it that we can do. How do we embody a posture where we demonstrate and put into practice what we say we do, right? So, for example, within Microsoft, we espouse to have a learning culture, a culture of learning. And if you look at our vision statement, we say that we want to empower every person and every organization to be able to achieve more. And then we translate that into an education context. We want to empower every learner to be able to achieve more, and every institution to be able to achieve more. And so what then do we do as an organization to demonstrate that? So we ourselves, we are assigned learning. We take learning very, very seriously. We have set timings and days where we actually go into our internal systems and we go take our courses, whether they are assigned courses or whether they are courses that you are interested in. And as a manager, I also assign courses to my teams and my staff, right? And we want them, and we celebrate the completion of these courses. We celebrate people who have demonstrated mastery of some of these content and these courses, and they apply themselves to what they have learned. And so that's something that we do. But doing it internally within the company is one thing. We also want to do it with our customers and our partners, because we're talking about empowering. We're talking about empowering every single person. This cannot be an effort just by one company or one organization, but this has to be a participation by the entire community at large. Yeah, whether that's our customer who uses our technology, we want to help them really be very good at understanding and adopting and adapting the technology and integrating the technology into their everyday use and the relevance of it. Our partners, we're going to equip them as well. And so those are the things that we definitely want to focus on. But we also want to cast our eyes on a little bit into the crystal ball and look towards the future. We have our own thoughts like, okay, maybe data, maybe security, maybe artificial intelligence, AI. These are the top hard skills that will be needed in the coming years. But what about the soft skill? We're also very, very keen to help people foster and develop and grow their soft skills. And so there's so many ways in which you can, cut this and slice this. And we try to do the best we can in whatever way. But I think at the root of it, I think we ourselves must be demonstrator of the fact that we are learners ourselves. Back to you, Chor Meng.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Vincent. Kiran, shall we hear about what Google is doing both in upskilling your workforce and your community?
I mean, I'll build on what Vincent said. I think one of the things that he mentioned in his initial opening round was the whole difference between lifelong learning and livelihood. I'm sure to borrow that for a future conversation. Just to, and also to take it away from where he said, a lot of Google's thinking is about evolving the future in this space, because we strongly believe that even though digital has upended humanity so quickly, so much, we're still very much at the beginning throes of what the future can be. Whether it is with artificial intelligence and machine learning, whether it is with Web 3.0, or with crypto and skills coming in, if a bigger, better, safer web is for 100% in the making, and that is well governed. And when we think about that, we primarily think about skills from our side. Our humble contribution to the broader skill range is on three fronts. We definitely think about accessibility, to say that one of the key gaps with skills happening is there is this notion that we are actually making information available to everyone. The reality is that's actually not true. It is still meant for a population that has access to digitization. So a large part of our thinking is, even if people are with feature phones, even if people are in sub-Saharan Africa, how do we reach them? And how do we still make a meaningful impact to their lives? And a very good example for this is payments, right? If you are a vegetable vendor sitting in India, and you still don't have much access to digital, just making sure that your currency has gone from physical to a digital currency is such a huge improvement, simply because the aspect of theft and the aspect of safety is taken care of. And then you build small abilities like the ability to save, microfinance, all that begins to budge from that small learning. So we actually are thinking about how do we make digital accessible to every walk of life, irrespective, and it all depends on what level of digital accessibility you have. A large part of our thinking is about building the future. So that is really about the skill sets. What is the new skill sets that are required for economies? How do we power them cross-industry? So that's the second part of area where there's a lot of investment going in, working with governments, working internally, and providing that as a body of knowledge. An area which I think about a lot is really leadership in a digital age. And what I mean by that is, if you just think about us as humans, our evolution evolves around 3 forms of intelligence. The first form is instincts. If you think about who ruled us for 400 years, it's people with instinctive skills, right? Warriors became kings of clans. Humans made progress because they made strong use of their instinctive skills. Industrial revolution kind of killed that form of our intelligence, and it's now restricted to the areas of sports, maybe, and entertainment. The second form is intellect, and I think digital is disrupting that in a massive way. That historical form of building intellect was based on how much the human brain can store. And we all know that's a very, very limited way of storing knowledge, because computers have proven that they can actually have access to unlimited information that humans just cannot remember that much. So we're getting appended with a second form of intelligence. What is left with that is unique for humanity is emotional intelligence. Call it consciousness. How we can perceive something and say beyond what the letters or the language offers us. How ideas develop. How builders or founders go and build new organizations. How leaders take away nations in different directions. Humanity needs that, and we need to hone that. I think the whole confluence of intellect and intuition is where humanity gets shaped. And converting that into a skill is super important. I think that's where, like Professor Leong is around. Educational institutions play such an important part in kind of building that and providing a body of knowledge for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. And we'll now move to Prof. Leong. Prof. Leong, National University of Singapore is the top university, not just in Asia, but globally. Can you share with us what NUS has been doing in helping to close the global digital skills gap and what your experiences have been?
Okay, thanks very much, Chor Meng. And once again, if I've not done so, is to congratulate Wiley on this important index that sensitizes all of us to the importance of this particular issue. And as a university, we are keenly aware that our role is changing, and we need to respond, the university's role. And we need to respond in terms of new thinking in the model of education. So we know that the problem being that we need to help our students. They must remain agile. They must be able to pivot. They must be future ready. The future is uncertain, is a lot of unknown. As much as we want to gaze into the crystal ball, we do not know for sure how things will pan out. So how do we prepare our students for that uncertainty? We have to equip them with the ability to learn new skills and new knowledge. At the same time, prepare themselves with more than one major. All right, so we no longer think that the T-shape kind of education model is sufficient. The horizontal being the broad skilling bit and the vertical being the deep skilling part, which is the major. And most of the time, people like myself have only one single major. I'm a lawyer by training. I have no other skills other than lawyering skills, all right? But our students, all right, are no longer able to do that, all right, to meet the challenges with just one major. So the university has dramatically revamped our curriculum. We focus on interdisciplinarity. We want to ensure that they have more than one leg to stand on, digital skills being one important leg for all our students. So there is now a common curriculum which all our undergraduates must go through, and one of the pillars is digital literacy. But of course, as Kiran has mentioned, there are other important attributes and other important skills, for example, the soft skills aspect. That, all right, we are also looking into that, making sure that our students possess critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, the emotional quotient to relate all right, to lead as leaders and so on and so forth. All part and parcel of the holistic education model that we want our students to have. So that is in terms of the undergraduate kind of, if you like, review or revamping of the curriculum. At the same time, we tell our students, your enrollment with us is not just 4 years. Yes, you come in to the university for 4 years of undergraduate education, but we are not saying that you finish with us and that's it, all right? We embrace the concept of student for life. Student for life essentially means after they graduate, they are automatically enrolled into the university lifelong learning program, where they will always be able to come back to top up, if you like, of the skills and knowledge. So to do that, we give to our students continuous education training vouchers, so that they will be able to come back and take the course for free. And then they can begin to stack the micro-credentials, all right, one module to a certificate, and 2 certificates, all right, 2 more certificates, all right, an advanced certificate, and then possibly even to a master's program, depending on whether they feel there's a need now to overlay what they have learned with short, in-demand kind of skills, all right, or they need deep skilling. So broad skilling as well as deep skilling, where you need to come in and do a full-time program with us because you aspire to be working in cybersecurity, for example, and you can't learn cybersecurity, all right, you know, in a short 1-2 weeks, all right. You need to have deep skilling in this particular domain area. So we therefore worked, all right, together with all the schools in the university. So School of Continuing and Lifelong Education essentially is not a regular school, is I would say probably a university movement, if you like, all right, where we bring together all the schools within the university to embrace this concept of student for life, so that we'll always be able to journey with our students to keep them relevant, all right, so that they'll always be able to come back to the university for continuous training. I think I'll just stop here. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. And thank you, everyone. I think this is very helpful to hear about, first, the level of thinking in relation to the digital skills gap and what governments, universities, and companies are doing about it. This is my last question, and I will ask it of all the speakers. So in Wiley, what we love about education is that we all have learning champions and for life. In about 30 to 40 seconds, and we'll do it free flow across this group of speakers. Who is your learning champion and how has this person been an inspiration to you?
Well, I'll go first. If a learning champion is someone that is a lifelong learner that I admire and respect a lot, then the person that comes to mind is our founding Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. His journey of mastering the Chinese language really well into his very senior years, that he is still learning the language and wanting to master it is inspirational to me. And I think he embodies the spirit of lifelong learning.
For sharing, Prof. Leong. Anyone else?
I think for me, it's my university professor who really taught me that there no curiosity, no learning, right? If you have keep curiosity, then learning will happen. Otherwise, educationally, you just finished, right? So this is very important. I think too often we are chasing for the tested results without thinking of, the maintenance of people's curiosity, which is really very, very bad. So I believe that once you have curiosity, learning will happen all the time. Thank you.
For me, that has to be my 86-year-old grandmother, who has fought typecast all through her life. Grew up in an India which was extremely not open to entrepreneurship, was an entrepreneur, fought typecast and being, in a society which didn't really allow women to come out and be entrepreneurs herself, did that, gave us all the vision to come back and say we all have the ability to dream and be whatever we want. And at the age of 86, she can still get onto a computer, have conversations with all her great-grandkids, and she can shop in Amazon and find me a deal much better than I ever can.
Thank you, Kiran.
Maybe I'll go first. When you asked the question, wasn't a person that came to my mind immediately, but actually it's a group of people that I've always admired, and that is the conductor of an orchestra. And the reason I say that, well, I love classical music. I'm not trained in classical music, so I can't read notes. But if you look at all the different conductors who are renowned and they call them maestro, they are way in advance in age. But they will be conducting the same pieces of music umpteen number of times in their entire career and in their, throughout all their life. And every time they come to the same piece again, they will invariably find something new. So they are always students of that piece, learning something, uncovering something, discovering another new way to understand the music, the interpretation of it, and bringing it to life through the orchestra that they conduct. And to me, that is absolutely fascinating. I can listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, over 20 different conductors, and I'll still find things different, and I would be enriched. And so they to me has found really people who take learning on an ongoing basis to an entire life. Back to you, Chor Meng.
Thank you, Vincent. Dr. Ethel?
Thank you very much, CM. So I think for me, I have so many learning champions. So in Southeast Asia, we have documented a lot of success stories of teachers, especially during the pandemic. They have weathered storm, crossed bridges and rivers to reach their students. And with limited resources, they have developed modules, overnight printed them, delivered them, and they have to attend a lot of webinars to catch up to deliver their classes via Zoom or other modalities. And they are my heroes. So I would like to request CM and Horace to show my heroes, if you can, please. And I would like to really honor them for the good job they have done. Is it possible?
Yes, so Dr. Ethel, in fact, when I watched the video earlier, I was very touched by it. It shows the importance of inclusiveness as well as helping others during very difficult pandemic time. Horace and I will make the video available right after the session so that everyone will get access, I think, to the video chat about the stories created by SEAMEO.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ethel. So thank you. In fact, everyone, Prof. Leong, Dr. Ethel, Kiran, Vincent, Libing, thank you very much for your insights and valuable sharing. I'm sure all our audience benefit from hearing from you, and this discussion contribute to an ongoing efforts to improve the lives of people by closing the digital skills gap. It is certainly not the first and not the last, and we hope, I think, everyone who has attended this session can take something away and build on it. And we look forward, I think, to more collaborative opportunities. Thank you once again. It has been a pleasure to moderate this session. I will now hand the time back to Horace for questions.
Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Chor Meng, and thank you to all the speakers. We have come to the Q&A session. Once again, thank you to all the speakers for all the great sharing. You know, I've had many great takeaways from the session earlier. I wish you have continued longer, but unfortunately, due to time constraint, we are not able to do that. But I have a few questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to group them into one big question. And that question would be surrounding the concept of generalist versus specialist. I did see a kind of a theme, a common topic from the question in the chat box that suggests that, you know, is there an advantage, and this builds on Dr. Leong's example about, you know, profession and the skill of and the skill of it. Is there an advantage of being a generalist with, you know, with the current greater range of issues? Generalists are able to see the bigger picture that a specialist can't, and hence we argue that the generalists have more transferable skill. So do you think that in addressing the digital skills gap, is it therefore better to be a generalist or adopting a generalist mindset instead of being a specialist because of the narrower or more pronounced role that the specialists bring, the inflexibility and the mindset? So I'm opening this to the floor, either to Kiran, Vincent, or even Prof. Leong.
Okay. I think it is important to have, from an educator's perspective, I think it is important to have broad skills, and at the same time you need some deep skilling in certain areas. I think the job role very much depends on the job role, what you need to do and what is expected of the person to deliver, what needs to be delivered on the job. So I think both would be important. We shouldn't be in a very narrow mindset where we are then. The danger is that, you know, once you are very narrow, you find that you're unable to pivot when things change. So for example, if you are only skilled in a particular technology and then this technology is later on overtaken by a new technology, and if you do not possess the general ability to adapt, then I think, you know, you will land yourself into quite a bit of a problem. What we are trying to do now at the university is that we are trying to avoid that possible outcome where we become too specialized too early on. But at the same time, you need to have some depth. All right, if you want to be an engineer, you can't not have engineering skills at all. But we would like to have engineering graduates that also have a certain broad perspective and a knowledge of other things beyond just simply engineering. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Leong. Would Vincent or Kiran or even Dr. Ethel or Libing have anything to add on this?
So maybe I'll just add my perspective. I'm a non-techie guy, but working in a tech company. I'm actually a microbiologist by training. That's my core, and that's a very specialized area. But I branch into technology and, you know, bringing the education side into technology for almost my entire career. And so to me, it's not a case of this or that, but I think you need always to remain open for this and that. So you got to be learning the skills that's needed as a generalist, but also figuring out what are some of the areas of specialization that you might want to go to. And this is really personal. This is not something that we should pigeonhole everybody into. And so it depends on your vocation and your calling and your passion. So it's really, really contextual. Okay.
Thank you, Vincent. Does anyone?
Yes, Horace, I think that based on the study that you have done, it's very important that we have 21st century skills, whether you are generalist or specialist. You need to have a good communication skill, you need to have problem solving skills. And there are some occupations and professions that we really need specialists, especially in the health sector or in IT. But in some other sectors, it would benefit a lot if there are generalists whose skills are varied and who can work in different pressure cooker conditions and can also contribute differently. So in a society where we are in Industry 4.0, we need to have a balance. Having the right specialists, it's in your availability of top-notch scientists, top-notch engineers. At the same time, there are in social sciences people who can contribute to the society, who are not narrow-minded, who are able to mix and work in a team setting. So I think a balance of both, and this is what we want for our children, that they are not just thinking for their own, but for the community, for the society, and for the family, but they are able to share their expertise. So I think a right mix of two. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, it's depending on the nature of the learning programs. If it's very professional, then maybe operational courses and knowledge are more required. But if it's academic, maybe preclinical courses are more required. It's actually depending on the program, right? And we usually divide these different programs into three categories. One is academic, another is professional, and maybe the third category is vocational, right? Then all the compositions, three types of courses: academic, operational, and also professional should be mixed. I think it's depending on the program. Thank you.